So you go down, go to the next one, and up that. So it's kind of counterintuitive. So down to the next one. And the file is very heavy, so I hope it doesn't glitch.
Hello, hello.
It's already okay.
Hello. Hi, everyone. This is my second time to make a presentation here with the.
I'm going to introduce you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's okay. So I'm, hello, I'm Yevgeny Nemchenko, and I'm a director here at the Free Peoples of Russia House, soon to be Senate Square Society. Yes, we're going to rename probably soon. Not probably, but for sure. This organization, for those who haven't been here, is kind of a discussion platform, a think tank, and a social club for people who are interested in issues about Russia and Eastern Europe, and who are opposed to the current of Russia, the current Russia. We're actively opposed to it. We don't hide it, and we welcome everybody who wants to, take part and in anything, in discussion platform, in just helping. If you can donate, there is like a box up front, and there's a QR code on the like a column there. So and today we have Samuel Hui, and we're going to be talking about Taiwan Between Empires: Historical Memory, Identity, and Lessons from Ukraine, which is we always try to tie it to Ukraine or Russia in some way or the makes sense, but and Samuel is a Mandarin English journalist and geopolitical analyst specializing in international security, cross-strait relations, and information operations. Educated in Taiwan and the United States, he has worked as legislative aide and policy researcher, bringing first-hand experience in government affairs and media ecosystems. His work focuses on disinformation, strategic narratives, and the intersection of media and great power competition. So please welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here to offer my own experience in Taiwan and do some comparison between Russia, China, Taiwan, and Ukraine. China and Russia, they share the longest land border with each other. So they are also the biggest neighbor to each other. So from a historical perspective, they interact with each other more than we can imagine. So, for example, even so, despite many Chinese, they are rooting for Russia in their war against Ukraine, but in fact, the only reason behind their rooting for Russia is because they think they share a common enemy with Russia, the United States. But in fact, they are hostile to each other. More than you can imagine too. So let's start with my PowerPoint presentation. I like to view the history from Taiwan too and Ukraine too, because Taiwan and Ukraine also share a lot of similarity with each other, because they are both neighboring to a very to a large competitor. How do I say that? They are very close to a large neighbor who has ambition to absorb into its territory. So that's why I think it is also very good to compare those four characters with each other. Okay, and also the most important thing to know is that Russia was a communist nation, and China, the People's Republic of China, is still a communist regime. I think right now, by far, the world's largest communist regime, and also both countries had a civil war. There was a civil war between the communist side and the nationalist side. There are also difference between those two countries. One is that China, the nationalists, they retreated to Taiwan. They still had some territory to retain their regime. But for Russia, the White Russia was completely wiped out. So, yeah. But there are also some similarity too. Because there are also white Russian immigrants in the United States who were still fighting the communists, and there were also Chinese immigrants in the United States who didn't like the communists too. So that's why I think it will be a very interesting interesting topic for me to talk in this event. Okay, first let me introduce myself. Right now, I'm a Chinese language teacher at Sulan High School in Prince George's County, Maryland. I was born in Dallas, Texas, but I grew up in Taiwan. So that makes me my first language, my native language is actually Mandarin. And then English is actually my second language because I was sent back to the United States when I was 13 years old. So if there's anything you don't understand, please let me know. Okay, so if you want me to explain more, I will do that. And I was a Bachelor of History from University of California, Irvine. So I grew up in Southern California. And I'm a Master of Art in Strategic Study from New Taipei City's Tamjiang University. And I work as a military reporter and legislative ad in Taiwan from 2024 to 2024. Yeah. Okay. Let's start a brief historical timeline about Taiwan, because most of you, just as I told you, Taiwan was ruled by different empires during its 400 years of history. So that's why we say the topic of my presentation is Taiwan between empires. But we are not going to talk about all the empires that ruled Taiwan from 17th century. That would be too long, and we only have like 1.5 hours. I still made like 100 slides. I will try to make them shorter because a lot of detail, I don't want to miss them. If I miss them, you don't know the clue why I'm talking about this. So I still have to keep them in the slides, but I will try to make them fast. I will try to make them shorter. Okay. So there were five eras in Taiwan's 400 years of history. First is Dutch colony. It was ruled by the Dutch East India Company between 1624 to 1662. And then it was ruled by Kingdom of Dongning. It was actually an exile of China's Ming Dynasty. Do you know? It was the last dynasty of China is Qing Dynasty. Before Qing, it was Ming Dynasty. Qing Dynasty is built by Manchu. They are different, a little bit different ethnically from Han Chinese. And the Ming Dynasty was the last dynasty of Han Chinese. The majority of China's population, they are Han Chinese. After that, Qing Empire was ruled by Manchu Dynasty. They are from outside of the Great War. They were just like Genghis Khan, they are Mongols, but Manchu, they are different from Han Chinese, but they became ruler of China. And they ruled China And they ruled Taiwan from 1683 to 1895. And then they lost their war with Japan, with the Japanese Empire in 1895. So Japan ruled Taiwan for 50 years until it lost World War II. And then from 1945 to present, it is ruled by the Republic of China. Remember, mainland China, their official name is the People's Republic of China. In Taiwan, it's Republic of China. I will, to show the difference between those two regimes, I will use ROC and PRC. PRC, when I refer to PRC, it's mainland China. When I refer to ROC, it's Taiwan. But also, it's important to know that before 1949, Republic of China also ruled mainland China. It was also the only legitimate government of entire China. So only after 1949, the country went separate. As I said, there was a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. After 1949, the nationalists retreated Taiwan. Eugene and my family, and also Mr. Wang, we are all part of that Chinese nationalist exiles to the island. So in Taiwan, we call them 外省人. It's different, a little bit different from the native Taiwanese 本省人. And they were also, most of the 本省人, I mean the Taiwanese, they are also Han Chinese. Like 15% of them are indigenous population, like the American Indian. But they were, and also it's important to know, during the Kingdom of Dongning, it was the period where most Chinese immigrants moved to Taiwan. It was doing between 1662 and 1683. And when Han Chinese moved into Taiwan, they massacred most of the indigenous Taiwanese population. So it's very similar to us, to America. Yeah. Okay. Taiwan and the rise of the Pacific empires. So before we talk about today's Taiwan, we will have to talk about how Taiwan became a colony of Imperial Japan, because later on, Taiwan became one of the battlefield between Japan and the United States. As I say, my presentation is about Taiwan between empires. So the first competition for Taiwan is between the United States and Japan, because at that time, China was a very weak country. It was not even a competitor. It was actually invaded by Japan. So we will focus first between America and Japan. Yeah. So Japan expanded southward in 1895, and it was ceded to Japan by China after the defeat. After China was defeated during the First Sino-Japanese War that took place between 1894 and 1895, and it was a Treaty of Shimasaki. How do you pronounce that? 马关条约. Shimasaki is a Japanese term. Yeah, it's a Japanese place where they signed the treaty, and eventually Qing dynasty, they ceded Taiwan to Imperial Japan. And also, it was because of that, I think, the United States expanded westward 1898. It took over Hawaii first in 1902. After the United States defeated Spanish, it took control of the Philippines too. So after that, this can show you how important Taiwan was. By the early 20th century, the Japanese Empire and the United States faced one another across the 八四海峡, 八四 Channel, foreshadowing the geopolitical rivalry that would culminate in the Pacific War. This is 八四海峡. Yeah, 八四海峡, that's the strait between cutting off Philippines and Taiwan, just like today's Taiwan Strait, cutting off Taiwan and mainland China. Back then, like 100 years ago, it was 八四海峡. That was the point where the United States confront Japanese Empire. At the time, I think in 1907, the Japanese Navy has already said that they will devote 70% of their resource against the United States Navy. So it was the time that Taiwan and the Luzon became a potential battleground between America and Japan. All right, let's go. And let me talk about Taiwan's first encounter with Russia, because we are in Freedom People of Russia's house. So I have to talk about Taiwan's relationship with Russia. So a fleet of long yo-yo, it was during the Russia-Japanese War in 1905 when Russia's Baltic fleet, they went all the way from Europe to fight the Japanese in the Battle of Tsushima. That's a very famous battle of the Tsushima Strait, and they went all the way from Europe and they went past Taiwan's eastern coast to fight in the Japanese waters. That was the time when Taiwan first actually encountered Russia, because Russia was so far away from Taiwan. There was this Taiwan Strait separating Taiwan from China, and there's also another very huge mass of land separating China and Russia. So it seems like Taiwan and Russia can never actually encounter each other. But it was wrong. Actually, in 1905, actually, the Russian Baltic Fleet, they had a very long voyage. That's a strategic island. That's how important Taiwan was. It was like 18,000 neutral mile from the Baltic Sea to Far East. You can see how long the logistic is, and that was one of the reasons why Russia, they lost the naval battle. They also lost the land battle, as Eugene said, because they didn't adapt to the modern war doctrine, unlike the Japanese did. So they lost during the Battle of Lusun. The land battle they lost too. They lost in the sea battle too. And that's how they came to Taiwan. I think from St. Petersburg. Yeah, see how long the voyage is. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I made this with the ChatGTP. It's pretty good. There may be some little mistake, but yeah, it's very helpful. Yeah. If you are interested in this map, I can share it with you. Okay. Yeah. And also it is very important to notice that it was because the loss of the Russo-Japanese War, it triggered the Russian Revolution. That's how the communists came to power. Like, I think 12 years later, during the 1917, during the revolution. Yeah, the collapse of the Russian Empire and the Romanov dynasty. Yeah, if you want to take a picture, you can take it. Yeah, feel free. No copyright. Okay. And there was also resistance and revolution in colonial Taiwan. There was from uprising to communist activism. That's between 1995 to 1915. There was huge uprising, a riot by the Han Chinese, the majority population of Taiwan, because they still believe they are part of the Qing dynasty. They think they are Chinese, so they fought against the Japanese. At first, it was led by Qing loyalists, and they lost a series of uprising against Japanese ruler. Major resistance movement include the 1895 War of Resistance and the 1915 Jiaobanian incident. It was the last open arm rebels against the Japanese by Han Chinese, and the last one by the indigenous population took place in 1932. That was the last one by indigenous, because the Japanese, they were far too powerful for the Taiwanese people to fight against them. So eventually they submit in 1915. Yeah, and also for the indigenous population, they submit most of them, they live in the mountain part of Taiwan. So it took longer for the Japanese to wipe them out, to suppress them. Yeah, but eventually they also surrendered to the Japanese too. But between 1917 and 1927, there was a rise of the left-wing activism, because the Russian Revolution of 1917 inspired anti-colonial activists throughout Asia. So there were Korean communists, Chinese communists, Japanese communists, and also Taiwanese communism. Yeah. And they become circulate among Taiwanese intellectuals and labor activists with assistance from Japanese and Chinese communists. The Taiwanese Communist Party was established in the French concession of Shanghai in 1928. It was quite interesting because under the rule of the third international organizations, third international, yeah. The third international said that because Taiwan was part of the Japanese empire, so the Taiwanese communists should be under control of the Japanese communists. But in the same time, most Taiwanese, they are Han Chinese, so there were also participation of the Chinese Communist Party, and so because of that, there were also competition between two communists inside the Taiwanese communists. For those who are influenced by the Japanese communists, they fought more for independence of Taiwan. They want to build an independent communist Taiwan. But for those who are influenced by the Chinese communists, they were fighting for Taiwan's return to China. After the defeat of Japanese Empire and the nationalists, they want Taiwan to become a communist China. So they were also fighting between the Taiwanese communist members. That's a very interesting part too. Most don't know this, but yeah. See, this is how the Japanese fought in Taiwan in late 19th century and early 20th centuries. Yeah, they use they start to use machine gun like Maxim, yeah, as you said, because the Russian they didn't use that, but the Japanese did. So, and they also use modern weapon against Taiwanese. Back then they didn't have that kind of weapon. They use a very old rifle. Only you can shot one time and then you have to reload it. But the Japanese, they are more perfect. They use more professional and advanced weapon system. So Taiwanese, they had no bad match. And this is how the communists, the establishment of communists in Taiwan. I took this picture in a exhibition in central Taiwan. Yes, in Nantou. It's called Taiwan Communist Party, under the Japanese Communist Party, but also influenced by the Chinese Communist Party. Okay. And right now, I like to talk about the rise and the fall of the Taiwanese communist movement. There was internal division and the colonial repression. As I said, they were fighting among themselves. Some of them want to be Chinese. Some of them want to fight to become independent communist state. So they were fighting between themselves. They were never united. And Taiwan is also an isolated island. So if you are in Taiwan, there's nothing, you cannot escape from a authoritarian or totalitarian regime like the Imperial Japan. It's very easy for them to suppress you. So basically, before 1930s, before 1931, before Japan started its war against China, before Japan started its invasion against Manchuria in 1931, they have wiped out the entire Taiwanese communists in Taiwan. They didn't kill them; they just put them into jail. Yeah, so that will become another story, potential problem for the nationalist China when they come to Taiwan after World War II, because most of them were locked into prison. They were not killed. So after the war, they come out and they start to rebel against the nationalists. So that's how it happened. Yeah. This is the Taiwanese Communist Party. Yeah. This is the picture they took, I think, in. Yeah. Yeah. And also, it is important to note that during the time Soviet Union, they had a Dr. Song Yao-san University there to train communist member or left-wing activists from Far East, like they were Chinese communists. There were also Korean communists and Taiwanese communists in their Song Yao-san University. It is very ironic because Jiang Jingguo, a son of Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of Nationalist Party, and also Deng Xiaoping, the communist leader who later opened up China's door to the world, they were both in the university during 1920s. Yeah. And also, I also talk about Chiang Kai-shek. I already mentioned Jiang Jingguo, his son. He's a Russian-trained son, Jiang Jingguo. Now himself, basically, after World War II, Taiwan's perception of the Soviet Union and Russia was largely shaped by the experience of Chiang Kai-shek, because during the time he was a dictator and he was also an authoritarian leader, but he was also a staunch anti-communist. Back then, we had a slogan called 反共抗俄, anti-communist and opposing Russia. So Chiang Kai-shek basically, he was in Taiwan, he was anti-Russia, anti-Soviet. But ironically, when he was also a commandant of China's Wampu Military Academy, at that time, the Nationalist Party was actually supported by the communists, by the Soviet Union, and also by the Third International, because at that time, Soviet Union, Lenin, and also later Stalin, they think that the only way for them to conquer Asia was through a neutral, a non-communist party, because they think at that time the Chinese Communist Party was too small. They didn't have enough power to take over China. So, and also I think Lenin said that the shortcut to conquer Europe is through Far East. So that's why they actually, in the beginning, they actually support Dr. Song Yao-san's revolution movement in the nationalist revolution in China. At that time, it was also it was called the United Front. When communists, the Chinese communists, they also submit themselves to Dr. Song Yao-san and his Nationalist Party. But by 1927, when after Dr. Song Yao-san died, and Chiang Kai-shek began to come to power with his nationalist army, he decided to wipe out all the communists in the party. So that's how. And also, it began to increasingly align itself with Western powers, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, while maintaining a deeply suspicious of Soviet intention. So this anti-communist outlook remained a central feature of political education and historical memory in post-war Taiwan. Yeah. And also, it is very interesting to know that by the time before the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931, Chiang Kai-shek often viewed communists as a greater threat than Japan, so leading nationalist authorities to suppress Taiwanese communist activities who had fled to China. So if you are communist, if you are a Taiwanese member of the communist movement, he will arrest you and send you to Taiwan, to the Japanese in Taiwan. That's from this book, Imperial's Gateway. I think if you are interested in Taiwan's colonial history, please go check out this book. I will recommend it. Yeah. You want to take a picture of it, or let me just move ahead. And also Soviet support of China's war of resistance. But after the Japanese began to invade China, especially after the full-scale invasion of 1933, the nationalist government and the Soviet Union temporarily reconciled despite their earlier conflict. And they signed the Sino-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, because Joseph Stalin, he feared that if he didn't help China, he refused to help nationalists, Nazi Germany, Germany and Japan will attack him together from east and west. So he wanted to devote the attack from Russia. So he decided to help the nationalists and provide assistance to Chiang Kai-shek against the Japanese. And Moscow also encouraged left-wing activists from Japan, Taiwan, and Korea to participate in anti-Japanese activities and support Chinese war effort. It was like Spanish Civil War. Doing that, they have international brigade. At that time in China, Stalin also sent international brigade to fight for Chiang Kai-shek. Just like Spanish Republic, it was not really a communist, but they still got help from Soviet. And this is how Stalin support Chiang Kai-shek. They sent a lot of aircraft, tanks, artillery, and trucks to China. And he also rallied Japanese, Taiwanese, and Korean leftists to help Chiang Kai-shek in its war against Japan. And during that time, China was not a communist nation. It was still a nationalist state opposing communism. And there were some Taiwanese volunteer group who fought under Chiang Kai-shek, but they are actually leftists. For example, do you have laser? Like this, right? Oh, okay. This general, his name is Liu Bang. He was from Taipei, but he went to China in 1920s to join the Huangpu Military Academy sponsored by Soviet Union. He was pretty leftist. He was arrested by Chiang Kai-shek during the first Chinese Civil War between 1927 and 1937. But after the Japanese invasion of China, he was released from the jail, and he, under the influence of Zhou Enlai, he became a nationalist officer again, and he rallied the Taiwanese people in China to fight for the nationalists, just like the International Brigade, as I mentioned. And also they call a return of Taiwan to China during the Japanese invasion, and this is how they had a Taiwanese youth group under the Taiwanese volunteer army, and they have flag raising ceremony in China. That was a nationalist Chinese flag and Taiwanese officer and young students. Yeah. And from Soviet aid to American support, and following the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939 and the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact in 1941, Stalin sought to avoid a two-front war in Europe and Asia. Yeah, Stalin, he was a very good strategist. You have to admit that. Even though he said he's anti-fascist, but he was still willing to cooperate with those ideological enemies, even Nazi Germany. So they signed the pact to divide Poland and the other Eastern Europe country, and also he signed a pact with Japan. So he stopped supporting Chiang Kai-shek after 1941. At the same time, tension between the nationalists and communists intensified too, leading to renewed political and military confrontation. In 1941, Chiang Kai-shek's Central Army and the Communist New Force Army fought again in Anhui Province. We call it 新四军事件 or New Force Army incident. So Soviet Union began to stop providing assistance to Chiang Kai-shek. So through the Land-Lease Act, Washington provided military equipment, financial assistance, and logistic support to the Republic of China. So after 1941, the United States replaced Russia to become Chiang Kai-shek's greatest sponsor. Yeah, this is the Flying Tigers. I don't know if anyone knows about them, but right now they replaced Russia. See, before then, Russia, they had Soviet volunteer pilots. Right now, they have American volunteer pilots. See, that's Roosevelt and Chiang Kai-shek. That's P-40 Tigers. Yeah, I wrote several books about Flying Tigers. If you're interested, let me know. And also, there was divergent paths of Taiwanese anti-Japanese activists in China. Some integrate into the nationalist government and the military, embracing Chinese nationalism and later collaborating closely with the United States during the war against Japan. There was even a Taiwanese Huang Caoqing. He was the consul general of the Republic of China in San Francisco in in late 30s. Yeah, there were some Taiwanese who actually stand together with the nationalists. But there are others, particularly those with socialist or communist backgrounds, found greater opportunity with the Chinese Communist movement. So some of them moved to Yan'an, to the north, to the communist control areas to join the communist movement. And those differing experiences contributed to the emergence of competing political identities among Taiwanese living in wartime China. So Taiwanese, they have different national identities during the war. It's not only today. 80 years ago, it already happened. Okay. See, this is how do you know? This is another ChatGPT presentation. You can see the national Taiwanese, they went divide. Some of them joined the Communist Party or aligned with the Communist Party, including the Taiwanese general I show you. He was still in the nationalist camp, but he was more sympathy with the communists during the war. But there were also Taiwanese like Huang Caoqing I mentioned. He was a Taiwanese diplomat working for the nationalist government, and Zhou Hong, a Taiwanese general fighting for the nationalist army. So by 1940s, Taiwanese living in China no longer share a single political visions. Some embrace the Republic of China and Chinese nationalism, while others align themselves with the communists. Those competing choices was profoundly shaped post-war Taiwan's political memory and identity. Okay. And loyalty, identity, and the Pacific War. In 1930s, most Taiwanese viewed China as their cultural homeland, while remaining subject to the Japanese Empire. As a result, attitude toward the Sino-Japanese War were often complex and conflict. So most of them, they don't want to talk about the war. They don't want to root for the Japanese, but in the same time, they don't want to be suppressed by the Japanese. So they have to stay low profile in late 30s. But the outbreak of the Pacific War following the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 transformed Taiwan's wartime experience. The Japanese Army authority promoted the ideology of the Greater East Asia conspiracy theory, emphasized Asian unity under the Japanese leadership. Thus, an increasing number of Taiwanese youths volunteer for military service in the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy. Before 1941, the Japanese didn't trust Taiwanese, especially Han Taiwanese. So, because they feared that they will surrender to Chiang Kai-shek or Mao Zedong's force, so they didn't allow them to join the army or navy. But after the war with America began, Taiwanese soldiers and sailors they are allowed to join the army. For the first time, large number of Taiwanese were permitted to serve in combat and support roles throughout Southeast Asia and the Pacific. By 1945, more than 200,000 Taiwanese had served in the imperial armed force, fighting on battlefields stretching from Burma to the Philippines and South Pacific. The Japanese, they don't really send Han Taiwanese to China to fight against Chinese because they never trust the Taiwanese soldier. They fear that there will be defection of Taiwanese soldiers to other Han Chinese in mainland China. So they send them to Southeast Asia. But there's another interesting story to know because in the Philippines and Malaysia or Singapore, there were also huge Chinese population there too. And a lot of them are actually from the same Chinese location many Taiwanese were from, the Fujian province, the southern part of Taiwan. So in Philippines, a lot of Chinese there, they spoke same language, same dialect of Taiwanese. So that's another story for me to tell, but I will try to avoid them this time. I will talk to focus more on Taiwan and Russia. And then one incident in late 1941 changed America's strategy about Taiwan because on December 8th, on that day, the Japanese aircraft launched from base in southern Taiwan attacked American airfields in the Philippines. The strikes devastated much of the U.S. Far East Air Force and paved the way for the Japanese conquest of the Philippines. Throughout the Pacific War, Taiwan served as a major military base, linking Japan with Southeast Asia. And American planners also increasingly recognized Taiwan's strategic importance in controlling the sea and the air routes of the Western Pacific. So the American strategists began to view Taiwan as a very important base, and it cannot be allowed to fall into the hand of other hostile powers in Asia, like PRC today, like Soviet, like Japan back then. So for American military planners, Taiwan was no longer simply a former Chinese territory under Japanese rule. It had become one of the most important forward bases of the Japanese Empire. And this is a document I found from National Archive in College Park. It was written in 1949. That was like 8 years after the attack of the Clark airfield and the Luzon. It mentioned that it also mentioned that the experience of the Japanese attack changed the American idea toward Taiwan. Right now, it cannot be allowed to be obtained by a hostile power such as the People's Republic of China. Yeah, see Clark field it mentioned. Yeah, and the communists, Taiwan by the Chinese communists will not make it difficult for U.S. to hold its position. But he also pointed that such rules will apparently be obvious to the security of the United States. Yeah, also the Major Carpenter, he was a Philippine colonel of the Filipino Air Force. Yeah, during that time, Philippines was an important ally of the United States. So he warned the United States never let Taiwan to be taken by the Communist China. And debating Taiwan's post-war future in 1942 and 1943, there were some American such as George H. Kerr. They questioned the capability of Chiang Kai-shek's government to rule Taiwan after the war. So he suggests a trusteeship. And some proposed placing Taiwan under international trusteeship or temporary allied administration before determining its long-term future. Those will, however, remain a minority position within the U.S. government. Those are pictures of Taiwan during the Japanese colonial eras. Yeah, and we will also talk about President Franklin Roosevelt, his China policy. Yeah, President FDR, he viewed China as a major allied power and an essential partner in the war against Japan. To strengthen Chinese resistance and support the vision of post-war international order, Roosevelt promoted China as one of the four policemen alongside the United States, United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. And during the Cairo Declaration of 1943, stated that the territory seized by Japan from China, including Taiwan, would be restored to the Republic of China. As a result, the United States automatically supported the transfer of Taiwan to the Republic of China rather than international trusteeship. That's during the war. Yeah, that's the Cairo Conference when Chiang Kai-shek he met with Roosevelt and Churchill. Yeah, it's from Hoover Institution. In U.S. strategy of returning Taiwan to the Republic of China, strategic consideration beyond the war against Japan. So American policymakers regard Chiang Kai-shek's government as the most pro-Western major political force in China. There were other forces like Communist China. They were never pro-America because they are communist, and also there are other warlords. They are more opportunistic. Some of them collaborate with Japan, and some of them they are too powerless to control China or unify China. So the United States FDR believed that Chiang Kai-shek was the only man we could collaborate or support during and after war. Some of U.S. officials hope that a strong national China could help contain Soviet influence in Northeast Asia and provide stability to the Western Pacific. And American leaders also view China as a potential partner in maintaining security in the South China Sea and Southeast Asia after the collapse of the Japanese Empire. How ironic today, right now, South China Sea is a major hotspot between China and the United States. But back then, in 40s, United States actually support China, the Republic of China, to take over South China Sea. And returning Taiwan to the Republic of China was therefore consistent with broader American plan for a strong friendly China, playing a major role in post-war Asia. Yeah, and also just in one proposal, Chiang even referenced the British of Newfoundland, suggesting that long-term American access to base in Taiwan could strengthen the post-war security relationship between China and the United States. So Chiang Kai-shek, he said he allowed the United States to use Taiwan and also Dalian, Lushun as bases, as air or naval base for 99 years, just like the British did to Newfoundland when Churchill was asking American support for destroyers. And also another ironic thing that this is Admiral Lin Zun. He was also trained in the United States during World War II, and after war, he was the one who took over the South China Sea Islands from Japan and French. But ironically, he later defected to the Communist China. So he became one of the first admiral in the People's Liberation Army Navy. So it's another example of how United States trained her future enemy. Yeah. Why was Taiwanese self-determination largely ignored? Yeah, right now I'd like to talk about why Taiwanese people were ignored during World War II. Because during World War II, hundreds of thousands of Taiwanese served as subjects of the Japanese Empire. Many fought in the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy, while others worked in military support roles throughout Asia and the Pacific. And Taiwanese personnel were therefore often associated with Japan's war efforts in the eyes of the Allied government. Some Taiwanese personnel guard in Japanese POW camp acquired particularly negative reputation among former Allied personnel POWs. Taiwanese political activists in Chongqing and other wartime Chinese cities remain relatively few in number. American diplomats such as American Ambassador Gauss generally regard them as unrepresentative of the broader population of Taiwan. And also left-wing Taiwanese activists face additional obstacles as their connection to communist movement caused by many Western policymakers to view them as suspicious during the emerging ideological struggle between the Soviet Union and the West. And here are some papers I got in early 1941. This is a memorandum of the State Department Division of Far East Affairs in December 22nd, 1941. It talks about how Formosa, the Taiwanese, back then it was called Formosa, and they talk about how Taiwanese and Korean were trained to anti-American and anti-Western. So at that time, United States didn't really trust local Taiwanese populations. And also, this is from diplomat John K. Emerson to the State Department in July 29, 1942. He said that it is better to return Taiwan to China because at that time, most Taiwanese people also believed themselves to be ethnically Chinese. So if the Japanese defeat, they might be more likely to welcome China instead of making Taiwan an independent state. So at that time, the United States decided that Taiwan should be returned to a pro-American China under Chiang Kai-shek. Taiwan or the Philippines. And also in 1943, there was a debate between the U.S. military. There was a debate between General MacArthur and Admiral Nimitz about whether the United States should attack Philippines first or Taiwan first. Navy always support Chiang Kai-shek because they believe that if they attack Taiwan, they can open up a seaport in southern China to support Chiang Kai-shek's government. But for General Douglas MacArthur, he argued that the liberation of the Philippines should take priority. He emphasized that both the strategic value of the Philippines and his former promise to return after the 1942 withdrawal. Because Philippines back then was an American colony, so it was an American territory. So it should be, for MacArthur, there should be no problem for him to take over Philippines first instead of Taiwan. And also another reason he said he used is that the Philippines offered stronger local support, better logistical prospects, and also fewer uncertainties. But in Taiwan, at that time, if the United States land in Taiwan, many Taiwanese may support Japan, so it will become more difficult for America to take over the island. And also, in 1944, Chiang Kai-shek's force they suffered a major setback during Japan's Ichigo operations. So Chiang Kai-shek was unable to hold the port, the Xiamen, in southern China. So there was no reason for America to attack Taiwan first anymore. Okay. Yeah, this is how the map of Taiwan, yeah, it shows why Taiwan was a major communication line in the Western Pacific. And it is also important to note that even though the United States didn't land in Taiwan, it still bombed Taiwan during World War II. This is the attack of Takao, Kaohsiung Harbor in 1944. Yeah, I will skip those. Yeah, those are some map of Taiwan during World War II. The bombing of Formosa. Yeah. Mostly they are carried out by the 5th Air Force from the Philippines. Yeah, this also shows another perspective of the Philippines, how close Philippines and Taiwan were before and during World War II. Also, when they bombed Taiwan, they also dropped a leaflet to show Taiwan that Taiwan will be returned to China after World War II, to the Republic of China after World War II. Yeah. And also, in 1945, there were also order from the Department of State to start to call Taiwan instead of Formosa, because at that time, ROC called Taiwan, but most Western countries, including America, call it Formosa. And American support for the ROC takeover of Taiwan in 1945, following Japan's surrender, Allied occupation arrangement in East Asia were implemented under Douglas MacArthur's General Order No. 1. The order directs Japanese forces in Taiwan to surrender to the representative of the Republic of China. To facilitate the transfer of authority, the United States provide naval transportation and logistic support to enable national Chinese officials and troops to reach Taiwan and accept the Japanese surrender. At that time, China's navy was almost wiped out by the Japanese, so without American assistance, Chiang Kai-shek will never be able to send his troops to Taiwan. Also, a formal peace treaty ending the war had not yet been concluded, and the ultimate legal disposition of Taiwan remained to be settled through post-war diplomatic agreement. The United States did not challenge the Republic of China's assumption of administrative control over the island. Yeah, see, that's how United States helped the Chinese nationalists to take over Taiwan. See, the U.S. Navy transferred them to the island. This is taken in Jilo, a strategic a port in northern Taiwan. And also those are the Chinese nationalist troops landing in Jilo. And this is how the surrender ceremony taken place in Taipei. And this, at that time, the Taiwanese, they welcomed the nationalist Taiwan because at the time, there was no really concept of Taiwan independence movement. So Taiwanese at the time were rather, they welcomed the Chinese at the time. And growing tension under ROC administration, many Taiwanese initially welcomed the arrival of the Republic of China, viewing it as the end of 50 years of the Japanese colonial rule and a return to Chinese administration. However, the transition soon revealed significant political, cultural, and social difference that had development during the half-century of separation. Friction emerged between local residents and newly arrived officials from the mainland. Complaints about corruption, administrative inefficiency, and poor discipline among some government personnel became increasingly common. At the same time, economic disruptions, shortage of goods, and rapid inflation contribute to growing public disaffection. Yeah, and the rise of Cold War politics in Taiwan. And following Japan's surrender in 1945, political extraction imposed during the colonial period were left, allowing former left-wing activists and underground communist sympathizers to re-enter public life. As I said in the beginning, right now they are all released from their prisoner, so they can sorry, drink some water. Oh, sorry. So now they can criticize the nationalists instead of the Japanese. And at the same time, the United States increasingly support the ROC as part of the emerging Cold War strategy in East Asia. Political conflicts on Taiwan therefore became linked to the broader global confrontation between communists and anti-communist forces. Demonstration, labor activism, and anti-American campaigns organized by left-wing groups reflect the growing influence of Cold War politics on the island. By the late 1940s, Taiwan had become more than a former Japanese colony. It was rapidly emerging as a strategic frontier where the interests of the Chinese nationalists, communists, the Soviet bloc, and the United States intersect. And right now, I'm going to talk about a very famous incident in Taiwan, the February 28 incident. It took place in 1947. There was a long-standing frustration of the national administration erupt after the government agent confront a woman accused of selling untaxed cigarettes in Taipei. Public anger quickly spread throughout the island, transforming the local dispute into a broader political crisis. Demonstrators attacked government officials and the symbol of state authority, while violence also occurred against some mainland Chinese civilians. In several parts of the island, local activists, students, former Japanese trained soldiers, community leaders, government and left-wing organizers form committees and armed groups to challenge government control. Those groups, however, differ significantly in their political goals and were far from united. And the national government, already heavily committed to the Chinese civil war on the mainland, viewed the situation as a serious threat to its authority. Reinforcements from the mainland arrived at Keelung on between March 8 and 9, and rapidly re-established control over the island through overwhelming military forces. During the suppression, many civilian, intellectual, local leaders and suspect descendants were killed or arrested. While the government successfully restored order, the violence left deep scar in Taiwanese society and contributed to lasting distrust between many Taiwanese residents and the nationalist regime. Yeah. I cannot find too many pictures of the February 28 incident. I think those are one of two I found when I visited Taiwan's 228 museum a few years ago. Those are some civilians killed by the soldiers on the street of Taipei. Yeah, very few photos actually I can find. And there are also other civilians being killed on the street, shot on the street too. Yeah. And competing political vision after the February 28 incident. So after the February 28 incident, they become to, sorry, yeah. There are three different political perception emerge. Some of them look toward the Communist Party as an alternative to the nationalist rule, inspired by anti-colonial and socialist and revolutionary ideas. Many young intellectuals, students, and activists joined underground communist organizations. And the members in Communist Network on Taiwan grew rapidly between 1947 and 1950, making the island an important target of nationalist counterinsurgency efforts. A second group continued to identify with the Chinese nationalists and the Republic of China. Some had long viewed Taiwan's return to Chinese rule as the fulfillment of nationalist aspirations, while others concurred that cooperation with the nationalist government offered the best path to stability amid the Chinese Civil War and growing Cold War tensions. And there was another political vision also was born too. There are also Taiwanese people they began to call for self-determination and eventual independence. Influenced by principle of national self-government and the uncertain international legal status of Taiwan after World War II, those ALC activists saw support from the United States and the broader international community. One of the most prominent figures in this movement was Thomas Liao Wenyi, who had previously supported the Chinese war effort against Japan during World War II before becoming a leading advocate of Taiwan independence. Yeah, so right now, back then there were also only two competitors, communists and nationalists. Now a third one emerged, calling for independence. Okay, also there was also a debate in U.S. government over Taiwan after the 228 incident. Yeah, there was and there were some people like like George Kerr. He was an American official staying in Taiwan. He was shocked by the scale of the repression. Kerr argued that Washington should consider supporting Taiwanese demand for self-government and protection from nationalist misrule. And concern over the situation also reached Congress following the outbreak of the February 28 incident. Senator George H. Bull, he wrote to the State Department urging the United States to condemn the nationalist government action, comparing the repression in Taiwan to the abuse committed by Soviet force in Eastern Europe. During that time in Czech and also other Eastern Bloc country, there were some incidents taking place too. But by late 1940s, Taiwan had become a political crossroads where communist revolution, Chinese nationalism, and Taiwanese self-determination compared for the loyalty of the island's population. And at the time, acting Secretary of State Dean Acheson responded Senator Bull on April 11, 1947. He said that jurisdiction of the ROC and that the United States was not in. He said the development in Taiwan were made falling with the jurisdiction of the Republic of China government, and that the U.S. was not in a position to intervene directly. Washington therefore declined to support proposal for international supervision or Taiwanese independence. Also, some American diplomats and politics questioned nationalist rule on Taiwan. Official U.S. policy continued to treat the island as being under the administration of the ROC. In practice, the United States chose not to challenge ROC of Taiwan, despite growing criticisms of nationalist governments. Yeah, this is the telegram sent by Acting Secretary of State Dean Acheson to Senator Bull. He said that the United States will not challenge the ROC administration of Taiwan. Yeah. At that time? There were some challenges in Taiwan already. The martial law was not there yet. It was declared, I think, 1949. After the, but there were still other parties, but just like the parties in China today, they all follow. They all have to follow the nationalists. Yeah. And reform, not independence, Taiwan after the February 20 incident. So the United States, instead supporting independence, they support Taiwan to take reform. For example, there was the Governor General Chen Yi. He became extremely unpopular among Taiwanese population after the 228 incident. So he was replaced by Wei Daoming. He was a former U.S. Chinese ambassador to United States and considered more pro-American. And also the Taiwan Administrative Office, the more centralized administration office in Taiwan modeled after the Japanese colonial system was also abolished. It was replaced by the Taiwan provincial government, providing a more conventional provincial administration. Yeah, some reform were taking place. Yeah, that's Chen Yi, that's Wei Daoming. And land reform also took place. Yeah, with the support of the United States, land reform and social change. The United States provide economic assistance, and technical advice to the ROC government to start redistribute the land to farmers. Yeah, and the rent reduction was to 33.5%. And those measures reduce the burden of tenant farmers, increase agricultural productivity, expand rural prosperity, and contribute to long-term social stability. Yeah, some land were taken away from the landlords to the farmer, but it's different from mainland China because after the communists take over, they shoot they execute all the landowner in China. But in Taiwan, it didn't go that far. Most of the landowner they actually survive and they became capitalists instead of being murdered by the nationalists. Yeah, this is the land reform team in Taiwan. And also, this is a different path from mainland China. Taiwan's land reform was generally more gradual and less violent than that of Chinese mainland. Many former landlords receive compensation and later invest in commerce and the industry, helping create a new intellectual class. Also, reforms improve living conditions. They did not erase the memory of the 22A incident. And some Taiwanese political activists and intellectuals went into exile in Japan. Those overseas communities become an important center for the growth of the post-war Taiwanese independence movement. So a third challenger emerged. And the Chinese Civil War and the nationalists retreat to Taiwan. In 1949, the ROC was defeated by the Communist Party of China. In the Civil War, the ROC government retreated to Taiwan, Penghu Island, and several other offshore islands along the China coast. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong proclaimed the establishment of the People's Republic of China, the PRC. And a comparison of the Russian Civil War. The outcome of the Chinese Civil War is often compared to the Russian Civil War. In both cases, communist forces emerged victorious over their anti-communist rebels. Unlike White Russian movement, which was largely forced into exile abroad, the Chinese nationalists retained control of Taiwan and several strategically important islands. The ROC government still claimed to be the legitimate government of China and accused the PRC of being a puppet government run by Moscow. This is a comparison I made between the White Russian movement and the nationalist Chinese, the Republic of China on Taiwan. Yeah, they both lost the Civil War, but the ROC still had Taiwan, but the White Russia they had to exile to other country. Both continue to claim legitimacy. They both believe, in Taiwan, the ROC government believed itself to be the only and the real government of China, and also they both have a tradition, pre-revolution tradition, keep either abroad or in Taiwan, and they accept eventual return. White Russian immigrants, they hope they can return to Russia after the fall of Bolshevik rule. Chiang Kai-shek, he claimed he want to retake mainland China back from the communists, but there were also key differences. Like for example, in Taiwan, the national government still exists in Taiwan, and the Republic of China, they still have Taiwan and several offshore islands in hand. And also, the ROC government still have diplomatic recognition, even it had a seat in the United Nations. And also, it is also supported by the United States during the Cold War. In this book, they also compare Chiang Kai-shek's flag to Taiwan. Echoes, how to pronounce this in Russian? I don't really work because he had they say because he also had a temporary government in Crimea, I think. So it's very similar to Chiang Kai-shek's government after 1949, but the difference is that his government didn't exist long enough like Taiwan today. Yeah, this is how they compare to each other. I think very similar. Yeah, the White Russia and the White China. Yeah. Yeah, both are dictator, but both anti-communist. Both are partner to the Western alliance. Yeah. And also Taiwan in America's Cold War strategy. Many policymakers in Washington feared that a communist victory in Taiwan would strengthen Soviet influence in East Asia and further expand the communist bloc. Taiwan occupies a central position between Japan and the Philippines. Its location places is a shared major sea lines and the air roads in the Western Pacific. As I show you in the map, is very important. Control of Taiwan would provide a valuable platform for military operations through East Asia. So if back then PRC was actually it aligned himself with the Soviet Union. So if the PRC take over of Taiwan, Taiwan would very likely to become a naval basis or air base of the Soviet Russia or submarine bases. Yeah. So why not support an independent Taiwan? After the nationalists retreated to Taiwan in 1949, some American officials questioned whether the United States should continue supporting Chiang Kai-shek. Another number of policymakers argued that Taiwan's future status remained unsettled after Japanese surrender in 1945. George Kennan, I think everybody knows him. He he support he supported strategic tutorship again. Among those exploring alternative policies was George F. Kennan. Kennan believed Taiwan possessed major strategic value in the Western Pacific. He suggested the removal of the national government and its military force from the island and put it under the direct control of the United States, so it can prevent Taiwan from falling into any Chinese government. But why Washington reject? Why it was reject? Because in 1949, several American officials, including Robert C. Strong and Leviton T. Merchant, examined conditions in Taiwan. Their reports conclude that Taiwan lacks a sufficiently organized indigenous armed force capable of defending the island, and local anti-government groups were fragmented and politically divided. Communist underground network remained active and could exploit any political vacuum. So at that time, most Taiwanese people who didn't like the nationalists, they think the communist China was their major alternative, instead of Taiwan independence. Because at that time, most Taiwanese people still consider themselves ethnically Chinese, so they rather support PRC instead of an independent Taiwan. And this is from Senator William Nolan. His nickname is Senator from Formosa. He was a very famous member of China lobby, and he said he also opposed the U.S. takeover of Taiwan because they opposed to sending American troops to battle in Asia. First, they don't want to send American boots on the ground, and also he he's a big supporter of Chiang Kai-shek, so he doesn't think that if United States overthrew Chiang Kai-shek's government and take over Taiwan, it was a step back against a World War II ally. So and he thinks also if you occupy Taiwan, it will be the same as Russia did in Poland. It will be a step in the back. That's what he said. So he opposed most of the China lobby during that time. Most of them are Republican. Some of them are Democrat. They support free China, Chiang Kai-shek's free China in Taiwan instead of rooting for Taiwan independence. That was a reality in early 1950s. And why Washington? Yeah, and also the rest of direct American intervention. So they don't want a direct military intervention, and also they don't want to overthrow a recent wartime ally only 4 years after the defeat of Japan. And policymakers fear that the United States would appear to be acting as a colonial or imperial power. Both nationalists and communist Chinese would condemn American intervention, and there were also anti-American sentiment could spread throughout East Asia. This is also from Assistant Secretary of State William W. Butterworth. He said to Dean Acheson, suggests that a United States occupation of Taiwan could not prevent island from falling into the communists. And he feared that eventually such a step will make Chinese nationalism an enemy of the United States, because during World War II, Chinese nationalism stand in the side of the United States against Japan. Right now, the United States hopes that one day China will help United States against Soviet Union. So that's why they didn't support Taiwan independence. So we call this the Titoism expectation. During 1949 and 1950, many officials in the Truman administration had not yet concluded that the communist China would remain permanently aligned with Moscow. Some policymakers hoped that Chinese communists might eventually follow a path similar to that of Joseph Tito in Yugoslavia. And just as Yugoslavia had broken with the Soviet Union in 1948, Washington hoped Beijing might pursue a more independent foreign policy. Those possibilities encourage caution rather than confrontation toward the newly established People's Republic of China. This is Tito and Mao. And the Korean War and American reversal on Taiwan. Eventually, the outbreak of the Korean War changed the U.S. policy forever. On June 27, 1950, President Harry Truman ordered the United States 7th Fleet to patrol the Taiwan Strait. Truman declared that Taiwan's future should be determined by peace means rather than military force. Yeah, that's the visit of Arthur Strop, commander of the U.S. 7th Fleet, to Taipei with Chiang Kai-shek right after Korean War. That's July 8, 1950. The outbreak of the Korean War was June 25th, 1950. So immediately after that, both MacArthur and commander of the 7th Fleet visited Taiwan. And Chiang Kai-shek was safe. And China's entry into the Korean War and the end of the American illusions. In October 1950, the Chinese Communist regime entered the Korean War under the banner of the People's Volunteers. The Korean War ended a brief period of which some American policymakers considered the possibility of normalization relation with the People's Republic of China. Taiwan became an increasingly important partner in U.S. Cold War strategy. Yeah, these also are Chinese POW who defected to Taiwan in 1945. They were all captured in the Korean War. And yeah, they become an anti-communist hero, so-called 反共义士 in Taiwan. Yeah. And the question of Taiwan's statute and America's dual policy. First, the United States freed Taiwan's international status. U.S. officials argued that Japanese surrender in 1945 had transferred only administrative control of Taiwan to ROC, not final sovereignty. So Washington maintained that the ultimate disposition of Taiwan remained an international question. This position prevents the People's PRC from claiming that it had automatically inherited all territory administered by the Republic of China after its victory in the Civil War. But also, in the same time, the U.S. also supported ROC, while Taiwan's statute unresolved. First, it backed the Republic of China in practice. American policymakers viewed the nationalist regime as the only organized Chinese government capable of resisting communist expansion. In the 50s, the ROC retained approximately 600,000 troops on Taiwan. They were not only capable of defending the island, but also had the potential to open a second front against the PRC. American officials also recognized that many overseas Chinese communities throughout Asia, North America, and beyond continue to identify with the ROC government. Yeah, this is Chinatown. In many of the Chinatown today, they still have the flag of ROC. Yeah, in their building. So that means overseas Chinese is one of the reasons, especially Chinese American was one of the reasons why Washington continued to recognize Taiwan as the sole government of China. Yeah, this is also a book written by the first U.S. ambassador to Tokyo, Robert Murphy. Yeah, he visited Taiwan in 50s. And he also praised Chiang Kai-shek for having 600,000 troops in Taiwan to prevent communist takeover. So during the Cold War, the U.S. policy was that supporting Taiwan or supporting it comes of anti-communist first. So if you are anti-communist, it doesn't matter you are dictatorship or if you are democracy or not, they support you. They provide assistance to Taiwan. So during that period, the U.S. actually support Chiang Kai-shek. Yeah. Anti-communism and political repression in Taiwan. First, U.S. officials were aware of political repression carried out by the nationalist government. However, Washington's primary concern was the containment of communism rather than the promotion of democratic reforms. As long as the ROC government remained a reliable anti-communist ally, American policymakers generally tolerate authoritarian measures on the island. Also, following the Chinese Civil War and the Korean War, American intelligence agencies viewed communist influence as a major security threat. A significant member of Taiwanese activists targeted by the security apparatus were accused of maintaining ties to communist organizations or advocating Marxist-Leninist ideologies. Whether aligned with Beijing, Moscow, or local left-wing movements, such groups were regarded by Washington as potential vulnerabilities to the Cold War struggle. This is Xie Xuehong. She was the leader of Taiwanese Communist Party. She also led Taiwanese guerrilla against the nationalists during the 228 incident. After the incident, she escaped to China. And this picture was taken during the ceremony when Mao Zedong declared the establishment of the PRC on October 1st, 1949, and Xie was standing right next to him. And one interesting thing is that Xie Xuehou, she didn't support unification of China. Actually, during the Japanese colonial period, she supported for Taiwan independence. But during the Cold War, she was forced to go to mainland China and became a ally with Mao. So that's a reason why she was later persecuted during the Cultural Revolution, because she actually supported to build a independent communist Taiwan. She was actually different from Mao, but she was forced to join the Chinese Communist Party because at the time Taiwan independent movement had no support from Western world. Yeah. So here is a CIA report. It indicates which Taiwanese actually support the communists. This is Xie Xuehou. She's here. She's mentioned by CIA. Here is she. So at that time, many Taiwanese, and a lot of them were actually in Japan, like Yang Chun-song. He worked in Taiwanese community in Japan, and he was also a leftist. And he gets support from both North Korea and PRC. So that's why at that time, Taiwanese descendants were actually considered hostile to the United States. And those are other Taiwanese who work for the communists. And many of them later also become Taiwan independence supporters. But at that time, they were all united and rally under the red flag. Yeah, those are others. Yeah, those are all from CIA report. And anti-communist, and also there were also limited support from the United States for non-communist opposition. American officials occasionally show sympathy toward Taiwanese critics of KMT rule, who were clearly anti-communist. Some overseas Taiwanese activists are able to operate in the United States under the protection of American civil liberties. Nevertheless, Washington stopped short of active support a Taiwanese independence movement, fearing that such efforts could destabilize an important Cold War ally. And also later we will talk about San Francisco Peace Treaty and the Treaty of Taipei. In September 1951, Japan and the Allied powers signed the San Francisco Treaty, formally ending the Pacific War. And the Soviet Union did not sign the treaty, reflecting the growing division of the Cold War. The United States continued to recognize the ROC, but the United Kingdom and the other European countries, they had already extended recognition to the PRC. So the Allied governments were unable to reach consensus on which Chinese government should represent China at the conference. So eventually, both sides will not invite to the conference, but instead, Taiwan signed a Treaty of Taipei in 1952 on April 28, 1952. This was the day when the San Francisco Peace Treaty was entered into the force. On the same day, Japan and ROC signed the Treaty of Taipei. The agreement formally ends the state of war between Japan and the ROC and normalized bilateral relations. Also, the treaty after the treaty, Japan officially recognized ROC government as the only legitimate government of China. Before that, Japan actually they want to recognize PRC because they believe that PRC has a bigger market than Taiwan, and also they didn't really want to take part in the Chinese Civil War. But with the United States U.S. pressure, they had to recognize Taiwan. And under the treaty, they recognized the legal validity of measures undertaken by the ROC administration in Taiwan after 1949. But it did not really recognize Taiwan as part of the Republic of China. Yeah. But residents of Taiwan were treated as nation of the ROC for purpose covered by the agreement. Yeah, it's also a dual policy. In one part, it recognized Taiwan is and its ROC citizen, but in didn't really solve the sovereignty issue of Taiwan. This is how the statute of the treaty. And from strategic ambiguity to formal alliance, on December 2, 1945, the United States and the ROC signed the Mutual Defense Treaty in D.C. The treaty entered into 1955. It the first security extended to Taiwan during the Cold War. This is a photo of Taiwan of the ROC troops, and also the Sino-American the strategic significance of the firmly Taiwan into the American Cold War attack in present deterrence against and enhance Taiwan international treaty transfer Taiwan post into a formal American defense of Taiwan integral part of the United States Cold War. Taiwan, like the authoritarian political environment in Taiwan during the 50s, post-war Japan allowed and his followers to organize openly, publish materials, and advocate independence without major government suppression. This freely in Japan, the move failed to gain diplomatic recognition in the United States or Japan, both of which continue to raise the ROC in the conference, a gathering that's more and Soviet. Mayor Zhou Enlai from mainland China in permanent role at the conference. Beijing did not object to Liao's participation, suggesting that the PR was willing to tolerate his independent activities. In that time, Thomas Liao was actually almost finished. Okay. Finish. Sorry, it's too long. Okay, so I will jump to the conclusion. Sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah, it's too long. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we just need a part two. Okay. After 1969, the United States again switched recognition to the PRC because at that time Mao Zedong already became Tito. He was in war with Russia, so the United States switched recognition to Beijing instead of Taiwan. So after that, Taiwan, the U.S. policy toward Taiwan, where the One China policy is determined by three communique and one. The United States carry out. First is the Shanghai communique. Yeah, basically like this. Yeah, so basically after that, Taiwan turned from a free China to democratic Taiwan. Taiwan become democratic. Yeah, I think maybe we should do another part. Yeah, it is too long. Yeah. Okay, I think we could do the Q&A now. Yeah, if you want. Yeah. Yeah, too long. Yeah, 7:30. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you can ask a question.
How did you come up with the research to compare the white Russians and the nationalist Chinese?
Because I have read a lot of books. Even in China, they have published book about White Russia. Because I think even in Chinese language world, they think there are a lot of similarities between China and Russia, and also Taiwan and Ukraine. Yes. Yeah. And
how likely it's China gonna attack Taiwan?
Huh?
How likely is China is gonna to attack
I think pretty
Taiwan as Russia attacked Ukraine?
I think pretty unlikely right now because after the lesson they learned from Russia invasion of Ukraine, they should be smarter about launching another war against Taiwan. Yes, I think it's pretty unlikely right now.
Right now,
Yeah. I don't know about that. Nobody can protect the future. Yeah.
Well, they're not gonna let it go, right? They're not gonna tolerate the independent.
No, they are not going to tolerate it. They are not even tolerating their own people. It depends. It depends on their military build up and whether they have these. Their navy and their air force is strong enough. I don't. But before that, I don't think it will be happen because in reality, the United States is still much stronger than than the POA. I think they may have more ships than United States, but they don't have real combat experience, and the quality of their ship may not be as good as the United States. So I'm not that pessimistic. I think Taiwan will be hold on for a very long time, but I don't think there will be an official independence to basically maintaining the status quo. Yeah, because the United States doesn't want a de jure independent. And and also, since we are in Russia, Freedom House of Russia right now, I will show some similarity to end this presentation. I want to show some similarity between Ukraine and Taiwan, and difference between Ukraine and Taiwan. First, both face challenge from larger neighboring powers. Taiwan, the PRC, Ukraine, Russia Federation, and in both cases, the larger power claim historical culture and national ties to justify its position. And second one, a national identity has diverged over time. Many Ukrainians increasingly identify as Ukrainian rather than Russia. Many Taiwanese increasingly identify themselves as Taiwanese rather than Chinese. Separate political development has produced distinct national identities. The third similarities, democracy became a source of international support. Taiwan democratized during the 80s and 90s. Ukraine democratized after the collapse of the Soviet Union. International support is often framed not only in strategic terms, but also a support for democratic self-government. And the fourth is security depends partly on external support. Ukraine relies heavily on Western military and economic assistance. Taiwan depends on American security assistance and arms sales. Neither country can ignore the role of outside powers in security calculations. Now I'm showing the difference. Ukraine, first, the difference that Ukraine is universally recognized, Taiwan is not. Ukraine is recognized as a sovereign state by the overwhelming majority of countries, including Russia, before 2022. Taiwan maintains its own government, military, and democratic system, but its sovereignty remains disputed internationally. Even the US does not formally recognize Taiwan as an independent state under its one China policy. So it supports Taiwan de facto independence, but not de jure independence. Next one is another key difference. Taiwan has a much longer and closer relationship with the US. US ROC cooperation date back to World War II, including the Flying Tigers, the CBI Theater, and post-war Cold War alliance. Also, Washington switched diplomatic recognition to PRC. Congress passed Taiwan Relation Acts to preserve close ties. There is no Ukrainian Relation Act, but Taiwan Relation Act. No comparable legal framework except between the US and Ukraine. And the next one is geography favors Taiwan's defense. Russia can attack Ukraine against a shared land border. The PLA army would have to conduct one of the largest amphibious operations in modern history to invade Taiwan. And the Taiwan Strait provides a significant natural defense barrier. The last one will be Taiwan's economic importance is greater. Taiwan is home to TSMC, the world's leading advanced semiconductor manufacturer. A conflict involved Taiwan would disrupt critical supply chain, affecting the US, Europe, Japan, and many other economies. Taiwan therefore occupies a uniquely important position in the global economy. That's one thing different from Ukraine. Okay, I think by now, that concludes my presentation. Okay. Any more questions? Yeah. Yeah, but it's in Chinese. You can find it. Yeah, in Taiwan. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm trying to write an English version. I will eventually do it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think that's all for today. Eugene, you have a question to ask? Okay. Okay. All right. I think that's all for today. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's too long. Yeah, I try to explain everything in detail because it's like 100 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of history. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, next time I should just start from the US empire. A lot of empires.
mean to hurry you up.
Sorry about that. I made it too long. Yeah, but eventually I jumped to the conclusion. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can make another one, another part.
Well, yes. Let's talk about